Welcome. This is An Afternoon with Barry Sparks. Don't expect any kind of sanity. Don't expect us to stay on topic. Don't expect us to be remotely serious. We were having a discussion about Kiss. I was not in the Kiss army, all right?
I was, actually.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me. Probably got into Kiss in 77, rock and roll over,
all right.
around there.
That's acceptable. Yeah.
Went back and totally fell in love with Destroyer. Still my favorite Kiss album.
Yes.
Bar none. Although Rock and Roll Over has got a ton of good stuff.
I was going to say, between the two, you got the best, yeah.
Then you get Love Gun, which has like the three really good songs.
And really, a couple really lame ones.
And some lame
Tomorrow
ones.
And Tonight, or no, Then She
No,
Kissed
that was
Me.
okay. Then She Kissed Me, which was a cover.
Even at 12, you're going like, what are you guys doing?
Plaster Caster, where I'm going, come on, you can come up with a better chord than that. That's obvious.
Yeah, but that was still acceptable. But Then She Kissed Me was it was like, what?
And then we get Alive 2, right? One of the great live records ever.
With the best songs being the studio songs on side 4.
Yes, totally. They were awesome. And then the solo albums, right? The 4 solo albums.
Ace's is definitely the best.
Paul's is second.
Gene's was okay.
Gene's was okay.
I hated Peter's.
Had one decent song, but...
Let me clarify.
Yes.
Now that I'm back into vinyl, I recently rebought it, and now it's one of the better ones. You just have to have
better
a little
sounding, definitely.
more open mind. Now that you're more cultured,
hey,
as it were.
That's the kind of sugar Papa likes, is all I'm saying.
You know that. That is... You might be even more geeky than me, but that is good.
Debatable.
Yeah.
we may verify that later.
Oh, that's great.
But just let it be said. Tonight You Belong to Me, the opener from Paul's album, is a really good song. Is okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
No, move on.
Right.
That's a good one. Aces blows it away, though.
Aces is really good. Then Dynasty. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I give it almost. It's got some good stuff. I mean, it was at the. I mean.
I really like it. Yeah, the band was on the verge of splitting up.
It's still okay. It's still good.
I think that was their last hurrah.
Creatures in the Night.
Don't know. Don't hear no Creatures of the Night. See no Creatures of the Night.
Check out Creatures of the Night. That's a rockin' album.
Okay.
That's a rockin' album.
Is that's 81? That's after Unmasked
and before Music from the
It's the one that has Ace
on the cover, but it's not actually Ace playing it.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Jim, too.
So, things to know about Barry and me is we were both total Kiss fanatics.
Yes.
Total Rush fanatics.
Aerosmith, too.
And we love Aerosmith. We just love them. That's just all there is to it.
Yes.
But that is not how you came to play on this project. You and I started working together in 2000.
In 2000?
Yep. For No Concept of Key.
I thought that was a little more recent than that. It's 2000.
No, it's 14. It's almost
I'm like
15
Rick Van
years
Winkle
ago.
waking up. What?
And I remember going over to your house. I don't know if it was your girlfriend's house or your mom's house or wherever it was. And I play you No Need for Words. And like on the previous album, Terry, we had Jay Trapp, who was wonderful, but needed a little bit of coaching because that wasn't exactly his comfort zone. So I went into this thinking, I've at least got to have some idea of what the bass line ought to be. And this song starts, and I'm like, I just turn to you and I say, Frank, I don't have any idea what the bass is doing. And Barry's going like this. He says, I know what it's doing. And I'm just
I had a big I had a headband full of acid on it.
And I'm just like, this is the guy. This is the guy. You don't need to tell him what to play. Just get out of his way, give him something to work with. It'll be fine. And it was fine. That's the one where I don't know if you remember you're playing. There's a long instrumental called No Concept of Key. It's the album title track, and you improvised a bass solo, including the only bass harmonic false harmonic I can remember.
I don't think it's ever been done since.
And I remember we fell off the couch. You fell out of your chair. We were just laughing at this thing. We went back and we listened to it. It's still on the album. It made the album. There's just do 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 wow.
Wow. Wish I could do that today.
So that's, Yeah, so that, and, and that was awesome. And every project we've done since then, we did Cryptomania in 2001, we did To Be a Star in '05, and this year we're doing Imaginary Love Ballads. And you've been available for every one of them, and just totally happy, honored, thrilled to have you on the record.
Thank you.
You'll probably in the DVD, you'll see that during the interviews we had with Jim and Doug and Rich and Tommy, Jim let go that you were what made the songs work. The way that we worked was we've got this scratch guitar, then Jim plays drums, I play guitar, and even for him, the song really wasn't coalescing until you came in and you played your part, and then the song started.
Well, you know what? I've learned this even with working with Bees and other records that I do. Sometimes I'll rehearse stuff at home and you work up parts. That's great too. But a lot of times even with Bees and stuff, if I have a chart, I leave it a little bit blank because when you see the chords coming in G major or G minor, it's all this stuff, you think a little bit more free if you're just kind of going for it. If I just totally absorb something, you're gonna, which definitely works sometimes, but you can, if you leave it a little bit open, that's what I think works with some of your stuff is that either you're calling the chords out or, I don't know if you have a chart. Maybe
did not have a
maybe
chart.
I just watched or something. But you have it a little bit of open, so my mind's a little bit more free to fill in the blanks a little bit more. If you're playing C, you add the E and G and all these other notes.
But it's amazing how, because you're juggling like three things happening at the same time. You're playing to the drums.
Oh no, there's only one thing that can go on at one time.
So what he does is, at least for this album, what you did was you had the headphones on, one off, so you could hear what we were saying to you. Another one playing the track. I'm playing the guitar, which most of the time was not in the same tuning as what you're listening to.
Yes, that was sometimes problematic, but yeah, it was okay.
Calling out a G, calling out a D, whatever. And somehow you're able to process it, and you're also able to, you sense where there's space for you. Like we're ending the verse, we're heading into the bridge, and there's just a little second or two of nothing right here, and we'll get a little fill.
Well, you know what? I've always had, I work with some different producers that some like to call reducers because they don't let you play anything, and sometimes you don't need to play much. I understand that too, but a lot of times if you don't go for it, none of the magic happens either.
The song just
so what
sits
I like
there.
to do is I like to play and let it all flow how I'm feeling it. And if something's getting in the way, I usually, hopefully, will sense it or feel like, oh, that's too much. Lay back a little bit. Or within this, if we listen back, I might go, oh, okay, that's not quite as cool as I was envisioning in my mind or something. But sometimes less is more many times, but you miss a lot of the cool, oh yeah, I like that cool part that's coming up. If you don't just, go for it sometimes, So I like to play, and even with other records I do, I like to throw more on the table, and then of course if it's in the way, then we'll get rid of it. But at least there's something a little bit exciting going on as much as I can. And a lot of times, we didn't have a vocal track usually. We had a scratch track sometimes.
I would not call that a vocal track in any way, shape, or form. But it told you where there's singing.
But anyways, it tells me where there's something, and sometimes I like to answer to a little vocal line or something. This is something, I can add a little lick or something. At least it gives me an area where I can kind of imagine what's kind of going on. And like we'll play it back, and what usually would happen is like, oh, maybe it's a bit too busy there, or this and this and that.
Or you can play out a little more.
Yeah, one way or the other. So it works good that way. So I think with projects, yours being one, when you don't have as much preparation, sometimes you listen back and go, wow, some really cool playing I did. That's really cool. Whereas sometimes I've gotten stuff months and months in advance, and you work it out, and I got my part, and that's great too. But you don't have so much spontaneous, cool little intertwining little melodies.
It isn't like you don't go back and listen to that later and go, oh, what I played was really cool. You go back and play.
Yeah, that's a great part.
I played that part correctly.
And there's something to be said for that too. Yeah, it's all matter of taste. Yeah.
No, and it's amazing. Sometimes it's not even until the final mix, when we're actually mixing the stuff, and there's this place where there's space, and you filled it before you ever heard the guitar solos, before there was cello, before there were keys, before there were the final vocals. It's almost
Well, that's
like,
easy. If there's a space, I'm going to fill it anyways. No.
But Rich could fill it, or Michael could have filled it, or anything. But just
I've always been, there's, of course, Geddy Lee, Chris Squire, Stanley Clark. These guys were my heroes, but they always played the bass line, but they had some kind of little lead thing. They were at John Entwistle. They had something where it didn't step on anybody. It wasn't so in your face like, stop that guy. It was still musical. And so I tried to hopefully right in the middle where you can get away with stuff, because you want something to be cool. I mean, you don't want to take over everything, but you do want to be proud of what you play, and you want it to kind of, oh, check out this part. You hear it? You know what I mean? So, which is hard for a bass player, because a lot of times you'll play something, and by the time everything gets mixed and everything, it's like, oh, wait, I'm doing a bunch of stuff underneath there, and it gets buried. But happily on your mixes, the bass is very, very nice and loud, and I really
good.
I mean, not that that's important, but it is important to a bass player. So very happy.
Everyone wants to hear themselves, and we actually, after Jim did the first mixes, I went back, and half the time I'm saying, turn me down, turn the vocals down, keep the bass and drums exactly where they are, because it was if there was a point where I could not hear you, then that was an issue. And if there were a point where I couldn't hear the rhythm guitar, I don't need to hear the rhythm guitar. It wasn't that great. It wasn't contributing anything.
Well, you know what? I'm going to go back to Gene Simmons here. A long time ago.
Gene Simmons, Phil.
The master, Gene Simmons. No, he actually said something very, very true, that girls think they're rocking out to the guitars, but they're actually rocking out to the bass and drums.
Because that's the low
which
end,
is the rhythm
right.
section, and usually people don't realize it, but that's what really is pumping along. You got the bass and drums, and
absolutely.
And like a lot of people ask me, like, oh, did you get bored playing bass? And it's like, I do play guitar too. I love playing guitar, but there's nothing more fun than playing with the drummer and locking in the groove, and that you're the driving force pushing everything, and I think that's the great part about being in the rhythm section, which most people think, oh, it's got 4 strings and it's no fun. You don't know what you're talking about if you say that.
At least people know what a bass is, right? They say, well, what are you doing? It's like, I'm playing rhythm guitar.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah. What's that?
And rhythm guitar it's half of the rhythm section. I'm playing to the drums too, and I would play to the bass if the bass were there, but when I'm recording, the bass is not there. So I lock into that too. That when you want everything to be in sync, you don't want some pick to be a little ahead or a little behind.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's all the stuff that we sweat when we're doing the recording, and then when you're mixing, it's just so good for that thing to have that kind of flow, and for all of the instruments to be playing in time to one another. So then things that are not so strictly to the beat have the room to go improvise.
Well, I've always looked at it like the bass and drums are the foundations of the house, the 2x4s and everything else. And like with Led Zeppelin, for instance, Jimmy Page can be lagging behind or clunking a little bit, and it's still great. But if you don't have that tight rhythm section, that's when it really falls apart. You can have everything else kind of sitting on it and kind of, a little bit here and there, but the rhythm section is what really keeps it together.
You think Zeppelin had the best rhythm section ever?
Yes.
I do too.
We might have the second one here, though.
There you go. There you go. No, you mentioned the Who.
Oh, hugely influenced by the Who.
And what's amazing, Townsend didn't think much of Keith Moon as a drummer, because he wasn't, kick on 1, snare on 2. So Townsend his guitar had to be 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Because Keith Moon was not holding the beat down. But I love when Keith Moon passed away and wasn't playing on Who records anymore. I thought the records lost something. I mean, Kenny Jones is a very good drummer.
Yeah,
Those two
yeah.
records are both very good, but it's not, for me, it's not The Who.
Well, I think it was right at the point where music changed a little bit, where producers were more taking a bigger role and hey, don't do that.
Yeah.
That role. So
Keep
like
it simple, boys.
I love even the 60s and the 70s, the drummers especially. The drummers were able to blah, 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 play all over the place, and it really created cool stuff. Nowadays, really, they don't do that. Drummers don't really play that way. It's more about playing the beat more than it is playing the fills and everything too.
Or burying everything beneath cymbal sheen,
Yeah.
for some of the alternative rock. And it's like, I mean, I like somebody wailing on cymbals as much as the next guy, but what you want is variety, right? You want to explore a number of different approaches.
Well,
and when everything is 4/4, 120 beats a minute, and you're just you're trying to make everything pound the listener into submission, that
which
only
you
works.
should do.
That's only effective for 2 or 3 songs, and then if you're listening to 10 songs of this feels like the same song that I just heard, just it's in a different key, it's got a different chorus.
Well, not to sound too old now, but like one of my big problems with a lot of newer things is a lot of the personality is all cut out of it. It's like if you listen to a lot of today's music, I always use the drummers for instance, but back in the 70s and the 60s, 70s, you knew who certain drummers were. You would know their personality on the drums. Now it's all drum doctor, whatever they're using on it, and everything's just quantized and cut, and there's just no cozy pal personality in there.
I think drummers, I think Jim, for instance, can pick out a lot of his current favorite drummers, and he knows them when he hears them. Dennis Chambers or whoever.
Well, I'm not including, that you mentioned that name. Those guys are still the Cats. They're still doing that thing.
Right.
But in modern rock music, I guess I should refer to as it's more sterilized. Where it's
even me as a rhythm guitar player, like I knew John Bonham when I heard him, and I'm not a drummer, I'm not a drum expert, but he just had a distinct sound and he had a distinct personality.
Another guy which you might not realize is Don Henley. I can hear Don Henley on the Eagles records. You probably know what I'm talking about, but I hear him go, "Oh, that's total Don Henley."
Wow, you're right. I cannot pick
great.
him out.
I can totally picture his drumming. Whereas nowadays, it's not. Like a lot of new bands, who's the drummer? Because we had the album cover, we studied, the drummer's this guy, and it was recorded here and there and there.
Right.
Nowadays, people don't have that connection to the music. It's more of some background music on your phone and this and this and that. It's all wonderful, but I think we've lost something which was really cool. I've heard certain people say it's either Beatles or Stones, and it's kind of true.
To a degree, sure.
To a degree that all music is either Beatles or Stones.
Right, it's either.
But
it's either straight blues and attitude, or it's more pop and melodic and catchy and even cerebral at some
But
points.
I try
like
to, even when I make new records or whatever, play with newer people or whatever like that, I still try to have at least the spirit of John Entwistle and these guys that were playing back when the golden age of music, which I think it is, either the 60s and the 70s, that's when people were, really listening. Nowadays, if you had Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, no one would sit through it and listen to all this stuff. You don't have the attention span. You got video games. You don't sit there and go, oh wow, there's a clock or whatever. You don't hear that. You don't care because you got, I got 6 million songs here. Let's listen to the next one. Let's listen to the next one. You go like that.
And listen to it for 10 or 15 seconds and then skip to the next one.
Exactly.
That's what and this goes back, ways. I remember when Joe Satriani, when Surfing with the Alien came out, I just graduated, I just started work at General Dynamics, and this couple that I worked with invited me over to their apartment, to hang out for a little bit. And they start playing, they have the disc, so they start playing Surfing with the Alien. They listen to the first song and, what's making his guitar sound like that? And I say, that's a flange, or that's a distortion pedal, or that's this or that. Okay, and I'm like, no, let's listen to the whole disc.
Don't do that.
Yeah,
Stop
let's,
it.
Let's not just listen to the one, to the one
it.
song. Don't tease me.
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, well, you know what? People say, "Oh, Nirvana killed me." Nirvana didn't kill anything.
No,
I don't
they
think.
didn't.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I say this in the most positive, loving light, but because I love the internet and everything else. But everything changed with that more than anything because of the ease of everything. Everything gets up. Now a kid today doesn't understand the concept that music was a product and that you got it, and you used to go and you go, wow, you own something. It was it was an important thing. It meant something more than just click on YouTube and put on Snoop Dogg or whatever.
You had to
Snoop Dogg's like 20 years old. Whoever the new guy. You know what I mean? So you get my point though.
Yeah, no, exactly, and like this whole thing of. You had to save up your money to buy an album, right? Because your parents weren't buying you
$7.98,
right?
if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something like that.
Something like that. And now it's let me just grab mom's credit card and go on
now
to,
it makes
go on to
CDs look like
iTunes
look like the wonderful. Oh, remember the CD and
you know what I heard that just blew me away? Taylor Swift's new album, 1989, first album in 2014 that sold 1 million copies.
See, that's funny.
This is November.
Because back in the day, that was like probably a disappointment for people, probably.
For the bigger acts, absolutely it was.
Yeah,
right? 5 or 6 was...
Because people don't. I know it's really. I guess it's wonderful in a way, but it's kind of like how. I remember I was just talking to somebody the other day about this. I remember when I first went to Japan with Yngwie Malmsteen, was playing Budokan, and I remember calling my parents and going, "Hey, I'm calling from Tokyo. Can you hear me? Check, test. Because it was such a crazy thing. And shortly after that, I mean, internet was still around, which I do remember a drummer I used to play with in LA going, "Oh, I got a new job. I'm working with this guy. You're going to download music on the internet." I'm thinking, stupid. What a waste of time.
Not so stupid.
But I think it's a wonderful thing. We all use it's great, but it's just changed everything so much. Because I remember going there and it was seriously like walking on the moon. It was like, I'm in Tokyo.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
This is crazy.
Where now, like a 13-year-old kid, so what? Google Earth it. There you are. I see you right there, and you're in the street corner. You know what I mean? It's taken away a lot of the
magic and the mystery.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. We're sounding really old here, but
the romance.
But there's so much. Everyone has seen it and done it. There's so many effects and everything. It's harder now to get someone excited about actual music. Going, okay, check out my music, and you're kind of going,
right, because
I'm playing
it's
Gran
so
Turismo right now.
disposable. And it's so easily obtained.
Yeah.
It doesn't hold the same.
Exactly.
It doesn't cast the same spell that it did when we were 15 or whatever. It's like, oh my God, Permanent Waves is the greatest album ever
Even
recorded.
like there's a lot of these great. One thing I'll say nowadays, there's a lot of great metal bands, like especially the European metal bands with the operatic girl singer or whatever.
I love the Within
great.
Temptations.
They're great.
Epica.
Epica's good, yeah.
Yeah, Simone Simmons.
But a lot of those, but like if you would have heard those same drummers, especially back in the day, what they're doing now, and they're probably really playing it, is so unhuman-like that. But nowadays you don't have that. You don't go, oh my gosh, I can't believe what that guy's doing with his feet. You know,
you're right.
It's kind of been
it's so much, for those types of bands. It's so much about the compositions, which are so intricate, and so layered.
Yeah.
And the drums are tremendously well recorded, and they're mixed really loudly, and it's all great. But you're right. If I went through Epica's albums, I'm not going to find any fills where I'm going to go, oh my God, I can't believe what that guy just did.
You know what? I think we should have put on our big gray beards.
Because we're sunny. Back in my day, when
but it's true. You know what? If I go into Guitar Center or something, I do feel part of a different world a little bit. I feel like, some salesman comes in, it's kind of like you're going like, thanks, kid. Let me go over here. Because they're from a different. Age. They're that, but also they're from a. When we came up, you had the.
We were chiseling on stone tablets.
Yeah, but beyond that though, we had the thing of, so you gotta practice. And I used to practice 8 hours a day after school, but now
I practiced 30.
There are some guys still doing it. They're still doing it, but it's like I said, the attention span has changed where it's it's more you want the instant gratification, and plus you can just okay, there's the riff, cut it, paste it. You know, it's a lot easier to get away with stuff.
Even going back farther, like when
How far back you want to go?
We're going back. Let's get into the way back machine. Let's start dialing back the decades. Around that time, you know, when we used to have like school dances in Bellevue in suburban Seattle, we'd have actual bands. We wouldn't have disc jockeys playing records. You know,
I remember. Yes.
We'd have a stage.
When did no, I hope I don't offend any DJs, but when that whole DJ thing came out, that was a little funky, wasn't it? It was like, you mean a guy with a record player going like that? That's something. I mean, I guess there is an art to it. Sorry, guys, but you know that was
there's
part
an
where
art to it,
there is an art to it. But at that point, it was kind of like, there was what's the big popular guy who does it? But I remember watching something on MTV when they still played a couple of
videos like 20
and
years
it was
ago.
like this huge 300,000 people concert in England or something. And there was a guy on stage going tick, 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 and it was just so boring. It's like he's got his laptop there and he's pushing a couple buttons. You can't compare that to Led Zeppelin or anybody who played.
But somehow that has found a mass audience. Like you say, there's 100,000 people that are listening.
Yes,
tick,
but I will say this. The other day I drove by school and there was a kid. He's probably 12 years old. He comes out. He's got a Doors t-shirt on and you're going,
there you go.
We're not all dumb, are we? See?
Ray Manzarek, Robbie
you know,
Krieger, James Densmore, and Jim Morrison.
Yeah. That's where I model my sideburns off of Ray Manzarek.
You did. You do him well.
They're not as good as his, but I try it. I try to keep it alive. So.
Didn't Manzarek play all the bass lines with his left hand, and he's playing because they didn't.
You know what? That's funny that you say that because I was sitting in the parking lot the other day waiting for my wife to get groceries, I believe.
The lovely and saintly
I was
Alessandra.
playing and Doors came on. I go, wow, it's so funny. The Doors, a band with so many great bass lines, and it's an actual bass guitar. They had a studio guy play it, but so many great bass parts, and they didn't have a bass player.
Right.
But you know, Rise in a Storm, all the bass is so
bass
great.
Line that is.
But
right, and that's Manzarek.
I didn't really appreciate them so much when I was younger. I was more metal.
Either. Right. I didn't either.
Metal, but more now the the older you get, no, I appreciate more the jam factor. Even Jefferson Airplane, you listen to that stuff, it's like, wow, these guys are jamming. It's really cool. They're playing off each other and playing cool stuff. And
they were more musically talented than maybe the record showed, you know.
Yeah. They even the stuff at Woodstock, you look at it and I go, wow, it was really cool. They really played their instruments, and people still do it in a different way.
Yeah, part of that was the shadow that was cast by Hendrix and Beck and Clapton and Page, who were so over-the-top, dominant, drop your jaw.
Yeah.
Robbie Krieger was a good guitar player.
Yeah.
He wasn't that good, I don't think, and I don't think he was trying to be that.
Well, I think when it really got...
So what they were was more subtle, right?
Well,
there's a subtlety in
by the time we got to the 80s, and I remember when Yngwie came out, and he was doing so much outrageous stuff.
Yeah.
And it was awesome, but after that, there was only one place it could go, and it had to go away.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when it became uncool to play a guitar solo, and I think the '90s were especially tough for stuff like that.
Oh, definitely. There's a clear line of demarcation from the excesses of the late '80s, which, okay, some of that music, right, I don't miss, but. They stopped playing lead guitar.
Yeah.
You know, they stopped and they
which
started
works
doing other
sometimes.
stuff.
Soundgarden,
which
like
does
great
work
bands.
sometimes.
There's so many great bands.
And they had other great ideas like let's turn the bass and the drums up and let's turn the vocals and the distorted guitars down a little bit and give it some more balance. Right on, that was good. And they didn't approach the bass like let's just hold down the root note and follow the guitar. Right.
Yeah, there were still a lot of great bands in that time.
Yeah, but I did miss I still lament the demise of the lead guitar solo in rock.
Well, it's kind of like, I mean, it's like you hear back. Remember the '80s? You still put it on. You go, oh yeah, cool. That's I mean, not to totally pigeonhole myself, but you still go like that. But when they go, remember in the '90s, and you're kind of going, Yeah, I kind of remember that one, but it's a little more bland. I mean, there was some great music there, but it wasn't
was.
so. You had a lot of great bands. You know, there's Dave Matt. There's a lot of good players and stuff, but as a whole, it wasn't so memorable. I don't think as. But now, once I think it's more acceptable now too, though, with all the bad stuff being said, that people are more accepting of different things. For instance, I'm going to use Yngwie Malmsteen again. When I was playing with him in the early 90s, it was really not the best in Japan and Europe. It was a great time, but in America, it wasn't really the best time to be playing that kind of music and walk around with your hair and stuff. It was like, look at that guy, probably still is. But no, but now you can go to the magazine stand and see Yngwie on the cover of Guitar Player magazine again. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of flipped around where he's kind of the godfather of these metal bands.
The pendulum switch.
Yeah.
I can't think of the word.
Cut
shifts.
your head off. I mean, swings.
Swings, exactly. So it's like if in the 80s there was an over-the-top guitar solo that was mixed 5 decibels louder in every song.
Yeah.
And by 1998 there weren't any guitar solos at all. Now it's starting to come back a little bit. There was a point I wanted to make that is gone. I'll remember it later.
We'll cut that. We'll make sure there's a point. No, but I think I watched a lot of bands.
It had to do with Train Back on Track. Judas Priest, Painkiller from '90, which was one of their best albums.
A great record, yeah.
They had to cancel that tour. Nobody bought tickets. Nobody wanted to go.
That.
Yeah, that was '90. It's one of their best albums. And
I do have a funny story about that.
And they're all set to come out and tour for it. And they played like the first 10 dates or 15 dates. They were losing money like crazy. Nobody was coming. I
got a perfect Painkiller story. When I did a record called Magnum Opus with Yngwie,
95.
The drummer Shane Gallus is an amazing drummer. I still play with him today. The producer was Chris Sangridis, who produced Painkiller.
Yes, he did. That's
so
right.
At the same time, Shane was working with a drum company. I can't remember who it was, and they had these special kick drum things or something that go in your drum or something. And they said, "Oh, I'll get you that Painkiller sound."
Scott Travis, right? He was the drummer.
Yes,
of Painkiller.
but the funny thing was to go back to the actual producer of the album and go, "Hey, they got this thing. It's supposed to give me the Painkiller sound." And he's going, "No, I gave you the Painkiller. I can make the Painkiller sound." So they created a whole. Jim probably knows, but it was some kind of click thing that gave you that some kind of slap, more of a slap thing. It was like a. I don't know if it was metal, but some kind of patch stuck on there. Gave you that king, 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 king.
And if only the bass and drums had been mixed to where you could hear them as well as you could hear the guitar.
I have some wonderful, I think I have them still, the raw cassettes from the Magnum, even from those things where the bass and drums were mixed up. And it's like, wow.
Right, yes.
Can't believe what we're doing. That's one thing I am always disappointed in some mastering when it comes back and it's so smashed and everything. It's like, it's so compressed and everything.
Jim
it's
and I
louder.
have this discussion many times.
I love it because it's louder, but it's like everything gets so smashed.
Right.
But like when you hear the raw tracks and they're still punchy and you can just
I think that's part of the allure of vinyl, right? Where they can't smash it like that.
Yeah,
so you hear the full dynamic range. Jim and I've had this discussion as well.
Yeah, one record I do love now, that the last Aerosmith record, even on MP3, it's really loud and really good sounding. I thought the mastering was done well, where it doesn't just smash everything. It still sounded loud. It sounded good. You can turn it up. But you're right about the vinyl thing. It was like, it wasn't about making the vinyl. You turn your stereo up.
Exactly.
Which it's not the case now. You have to make it so that if you're listening to, you have the Katy Perry song on, that your song comes on next, it better be as loud or you're going to look really lame.
Yep.
And it's funny when you look at if you look at the WAV file, if you pull out an old WAV file you ripped off a CD back in the day, it's got all the...
We're getting geeky here.
The cuts and stuff on it. Now you put on something
that's
like...
black. Yes, it's all... Yeah, that master file is all black. There are no...
So, no, I mean, it sounds great. But it does. I love the vinyl when you turn it up and you hear everything. Especially like if you... Steely Dan or something like that. Those records were so amazing sounding. That's when you had the real... what do they call it, audiophiles?
Yes.
People who really listen to music now, you don't need a system like that, but there was an art form to it.
There was. Speaking of Magnum Opus, so after after the first album, after Terry, in which J Trap played bass, and I went to Jim and I said,
Which,
you know,
by the way, exploded in a little green globule. He's gone. No, I'm kidding.
what Jay did?
No, Spinal Tap, where the drummer blows up
Oh.
and there's a little spot left on the seat. Cut that out.
Spinal Tap reference. I didn't even catch it.
Sadly, a strange gardening accident.
I went to Jim and I said, you know, for the next album, for No Concept, you know, I'd like to find a different approach to bass. And Jim mentioned you, and I'm like, we can't get
What,
Barry.
that guy?
No, I said, we can't get Barry Sparks. He plays with Yngwie Malmsteen. I have Magnum Opus. He's not going to want to play on something like this. And Jim, like, emails
No,
me.
he's down on this. I saw him begging for money down at this. Okay.
This cup in his hand. I don't know what's going. And he comes back and he says, no. He says, actually, he says, Barry listened to your album. He thought it was really cool. He liked it. He'd love to be a part of this project.
That must have been after I did an acoustic CD mastering it, I think. That's right.
Yeah, I think so.
That's where we go back to 1999 or
Right.
2000. Okay.
Glimmer of Hope, Ray
Yes.
of Hope, something like that.
Something like that. Something positive like that.
Yes. Yeah, so that was the tie-in, you know, and I'm like, nobody who plays with Malmsteen with these intricate, you know, and is recorded in, what was that, Criteria Studios in Miami? You know,
Yeah,
this big,
it was
you know,
big stuff.
with the Neve console that Yngwie ruined.
Which
but
she spilled a glass of wine on? Or... No, those were great times, actually. It was a very expensive studio. I'd be careful the way I tell my stories, but no, we would basically come in there early, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and goof around, probably jam a bunch of Jimi Hendrix, probably for about 8 or 9 hours. Around 10 o'clock at night, we might get down to real actual work, but it was a great studio. But I think that was still the time where there was the record company advances and there's money to blow, because nowadays you don't go into a studio and goof around at all. If you even go to a studio, you know what I mean, you make your time
no, so these
worthwhile.
are much leaner times.
But you know what? The funny thing was, after I did the Yngwie thing, I started playing with Michael Schenker. I did a lot of stuff, Vinnie Moore, Tony McAlpine, Marty Friedman, a lot of these guitar guys.
A lot of progressive stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of Mike Varney records.
Yes.
I remember being a little frustrated at the time, which I appreciate more now. I felt I was getting a little bit pigeonholed in, oh, you got to do this. I was like, oh, what do I got to do now? It got so complicated.
Where you sync the lines, right?
Yeah,
so
it was like,
McAlpine's
well, I
playing
want
this.
to rock, I want to play. That's when I joined Doc, and it was really a nice change, because I was like, well, 'cause I'm really a rock player. I want to, you know, so to go back to a more simpler approach, because that's really, I love all of it, but it was nice at that time. And then Ted Nugent came along, but to play more straight ahead stuff, where for a while there in the late 90s, it was just like, wow, I love the tricky stuff, but I felt like I was getting a little bit like the seal with the ball, and it's what
Yes.
I'm gonna do.
Yes.
So, but
The
now
performance,
I
yeah.
look back, I appreciate more, and I like doing that too. It's a good mix. But I wanted to, you know, play a little more, because, you know, you put on Back in Black and you go, oh, this is cool, I want to play like this too, you know. So you wanted kind of a mixture of the two. But that was around when we met. I didn't realize it was so long ago.
Yeah,
But
we've known each other 14 years, coming up on 15.
wow, we haven't changed a bit, I'm pretty sure.
I think, hopefully not. You can get old, but you don't have to grow
Yeah,
up.
you don't have to grow up. That's right.
Yeah, so that was, it was a great project. And I hope, you know, that you had sufficient freedom and that you were able to be a little technical, and you were also to just sit down and play a nice, tight, solid
You know what?
groove.
I think when you had contacted me about doing the second one, and for a lot of the stuff I do with bees, like I was mentioning before, I think when you say, oh, I'll send you a tape, that's why I think I was a little bit like, let's get in there and do it like we do it, because I know for a fact that sometimes if you I don't want to, of course, there's
we catch lightning in a bottle.
Yeah,
it's happened before.
Sometimes
yeah.
it's good just to go for it and then just go, what is that there? Okay, that. And like I said, I use at least some of the other projects I do, but sometimes, even if I know the song well, if I have a chart, we didn't have a chart, but you were still calling it some of the chords in other ways, sometimes I'll leave that and read it, even if I know it, because seeing the D minor there and seeing the G minor, whatever these chords, I instantly are seeing the F and the A and all these other notes.
Right.
Whereas if I'm just going like that, I might be more inclined just to stay on the root, which is wonderful, but maybe not throw out the more fancy part, which you might get lost.
No, and this on this record, I felt there was more of follow the chord progression, not in a boring way, but in a, there's enough happening here.
Yeah.
There's enough movement to where let's just play to the drums and lay, and hold down an A and let the C major and the D major harmonize to it. And, that was an interesting change in your playing. Because on the other records, you sort of didn't do that.
I'm sure I should have. No.
Well, what you played was great. What you play is always great. Jim and I have not had a bad session with you yet.
Well, I think sometimes when we're recording, it's pretty raw at that point.
Very much so.
So when you do hear it, if you just have acoustic or a guitar track, there's a lot of open space.
Absolutely.
So you naturally feel like,
Let's
how are we
fill
going to
it,
make this
right.
kind of work?
Let's
How
paint
make
on
it
this
go?
canvas, exactly.
So you have more room. There's sometimes, after when you do that, after you get done and you're like the vocals and wow, maybe I should have been more simple, but I think it was a good mix where you had a few things and your guide vocal was enough that led us through it and it worked really well, I think.
I think so too. I am really pleased when I listen to the playback of this album.
And there's a lot of cool different things you did too. I remember that was the first thing we did. There was a lot of, it wasn't Dream Theater, but it was a lot of different changes and a lot of different little things going on, which is cool.
Second Dream Theater reference in interviews. My head is starting to swell. I'm starting to think that I'm better than I know I am. No, like Grown Up, for instance. That's the one. Rich Katz, played keyboards.
Also
Rich?
On the other record too. Yeah.
He actually, wrote out transcribed the music for us. And, he was pointing to Grown Up. He's saying, look at all this stuff that's going on here. This is Dream Theater-esque. And I'm like, that's the only time my name's ever being used in the same sentence with them. But that was a thing about this. These are songs from my college years. So 28 years ago, where's my Geritol?
Oh my gosh.
And, I don't know.
That sounds dramatic enough.
Ba, ba, ba. He's how old? Okay, yes, Methuselah, keep telling your story. And I would just do stuff where, I'd play like a straight D, and then I'd say, well, what would happen, if my fingers went here? What would happen if I stayed in an F over this? Just these what if I did this and what if I did that? And most of it was crap, but the stuff that was good ended up being really good, and ended up making it to this record. And that's part of where that maybe some of that complexity and hopefully some of that innovation. There's this funny story from Grown Up where Doug Floyd was in session with us. The only person he came out to see play was you.
Oh my gosh.
Or was
Very
he there?
flattered.
Was
Thank
he
you.
there for some of the? In fact, you had an audience. I think for every Jim would tell
good.
the other people in the studio, hey, Barry's coming in today. Come in. You're going to want to see this.
So I'm not totally finished yet.
Not remotely. And anyway, this section, I don't know what it is, a bridge leading into a chorus. I don't know. That song doesn't have verse, bridge, chorus, but it ends on an F, and the next chord is an F, and I'm telling you to play a D. And you can hear Doug on the thing, that's an F. I'm like, it's not an F. I wrote this. I know this. It's a D minor. Doug, very respectfully, it's an F.
Was it actually an F?
Yes, it was an F. And it took me 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh, I remember this.
You do remember this, right?
I do remember that.
You keep playing the note.
Because I kept going like, wow.
This doesn't sound right. This doesn't feel right.
Something's not working.
Doug,
Yeah.
it's an F.
It's an F.
You should be playing an F. I'm like, no, it's a D. It's a D minor. And you know what?
Which would have been F sharp, of course.
Which would have been an F sharp, which would have been whatever. One of the things this project humbled me is I don't know anything about music or music theory. I just know the same 10 chords that everybody who ever picked up a guitar, how to play book, and
well, you know what?
G
There's one
major,
thing you always remember too. If one note doesn't work, the next one probably will. Or a Gene Simmons slide.
The Gene Simmons slide.
We'll smooth it out.
What is the Gene Simmons slide?
Just
That's where you can't find a note that works, right?
Yes.
And Gene does that half the time.
And it sounds cooler than the note being there anyways.
But for the making of this record, right, there were certain things that actually I knew who I wanted to play on, every instrument.
Yeah, you're hearing it in your head,
right?
Probably.
And well, it's this it's this rapport that we have. Like I know when you come in what you're going to contribute to the record, and it absolutely makes it better in every sense. In every sense. So reached out to you, email, I believe. And you're a busy guy, right? You've got a lot of stuff going on with the bees. You're father to 3 kids and a lovely, beautiful wife.
I got my cardboard sign on the street corner. It takes several hours.
And you tour all over the world. And as it just so happened, in March of this year, I think, you were in between assignments.
Wow, yes.
And I reached out to you and you said, yeah, I'm going to be okay until August, when we start making this next bees record. And let you know when, let you know where, and you'll be there. So we went through our process, and I emailed actually everyone, Rich, Doug, Tommy, and you, all the songs. And they actually, listened to them and charted them out, and Barry just said,
good way to do it.
When is the session, and how many basses do you want me to bring? I'm going to bring all 4. I don't, maybe we'll use them or not. And we came in, and I think the way it went was we'd play you the song, and you'd kind of listen to it. Is this, what's the groove? Is this a heavy song? Is this an acoustic song? Is this 6/8 or 4/4? How is this verse, bridge, chorus, or is this a whole bunch of stuff? And then they're, okay, I've got the gist of the song. Let's start going through section by section. And what we would do is I would actually play guitar, and you would watch the chords that I was playing, or I would call them out to you. And then you'd have another headphone on where you were actually hearing the drums. You were hearing if there was singing. And I think the guitars were in. And just off of that, some of those songs, like I Love You in So Many Ways, I don't know if you remember this, that's one take.
I didn't remember that, actually. We got one take.
I didn't either. You fixed 2 things. You fixed 2 notes that were a little late or a little something. But
impossible.
I thought that was impossible. And
that was luck.
And that's talent, my friend. And everyone, I believe, has a one-take performance except.
Well, it's funny because just last night I went to my niece was going to. She's doing a school play where they're singing songs and everything. It's like an hour long. I'm going, how do they remember all those words? I can't do that. I couldn't remember all that. And my wife's kind of like, you remember 2.5 hours of music? That's different. I mean, so I there's certain things with like lyrics and stuff I don't sink in. Like there's certain times in the shows I have a cheat sheet for lyrics, but for some reason I guess it's what you train your brain in. But notes for me, I string them all together. I have my weird way of, I know music theory to a certain point, but a lot of it's my own funky way of stringing things together or remembering things, which works good. And when I'm doing something like with your thing, where you're just getting stuff, and also just let it flow like that.
It's very 70s.
Yeah,
It's very 70s, even up into the mid 80s. Where you just start playing stuff and you see what sounds good and what feels right.
But you also you have to be a little bit unafraid of throwing out the bum note here and there. It might happen, but to make sure that all the cool stuff happens, you got to be able to go for it, and then, oops, fix that,
But there was like Run From the Moment, which is pretty much straight on progressive rock, and it's got some weird time signatures. Your playing in that song is so crisp and so precise. I mean, you're not getting 90% of the beat. You're getting 100%. It's right there. It's very crisp. It's very fluid. It's very progressive.
Well, thank you. I think one of the things as a bass player, drummers know what this is like, but I see, even on concerts and wherever I'm at, there's one eye on the hi-hat and everything else, which the drums and the bass were just locked together. That's the whole thing. So So even when I'm hearing this chord change, somehow I'm still hearing that.
Yeah.
So you just kind of go for it, and like I said, if there's something doesn't work out, which does happen, you just go ahead and punch it in and fix it. But at least you didn't sacrifice magical, cool stuff.
Do you remember that you knocked 9 songs out in one 6-hour day?
I didn't remember it was that many. That's awesome. Whoever did that.
Well, when you're able to do, I Love You in So Many Ways in one take, it doesn't take half an hour to get the bass. It takes 5 minutes, and then we move on to the next track. Yeah, you got.
I think there's a little bit of luck
songs
involved.
That's also one of the songs where it's the same chord change for the whole 5 minutes.
I can remember. You know what's funny? I can remember when I was 11 or 12. My grandmother, who is 94 years old.
Now is 94 or then?
Now is 94 years old, knew a few chords, and we would strum together, and she would play acoustic guitar, and I would strum along with her. And I would just follow the chords. And as crazy as that sounds, I still do a little bit of that same thing. Where I'm good at following. I'm also, I'm used to going into situations. I'm used to, especially with bees or something, they have so many hit songs and stuff that we could be touring for 3 months, and all of a sudden you get, okay, we're gonna go rehearsal next week. Here's another 30 songs, and you'd like 30 songs. It's like a lot of stuff to remember up here. So I'm used to it. Whereas I know that playing with some other guys, I'm not mentioning names because they're all wonderful, but if they're used to playing the same 14 songs for 40 years, that thing of exercising that memory thing is a little bit harder. It takes a little longer. So I like to keep it. It's cool to do stuff like this where you keep it kind of in check, and that's what I love about playing with bees. They always keep you on your toes, where it's like it keeps you sharp and you keep working. Because I don't like getting stale. Like that. I'm not mentioning names, but they're all wonderful, great bands and stuff. But sometimes you have the same set and you've been doing it for 10 years and something, and it's like it's hard to change that. And if you've been doing that for so long, like I said, your brain won't soak up anything new. So you came into the sessions with the Ted Nugent MXR phase shifter, right? That was actually one of not the original one from Stranglehold. I used to use that one with Ted and this number 2 pedal, Phase 100 MXR, which I think is one of the coolest effects on bass. If you use it, like we did, just in the part here and there, it works really good. I call it the Stranglehold effect, but it was really cool using that exact pedal. But they're all the same, of course. That was one I used with Ted for years and years. It just has that growling, blah, blah, blah. There's this thing to it where it really spreads it wide to you. It almost feels like there's a stereo spread on it where it comes out. And it's like, where's it coming from now? And I just brought that. I'd used it on something else I did recently. I thought, wow, it's really cool. I'll just bring it just in case we can throw it in there. But now I listen back, and it's really cool when it comes in on that part. And it somehow brings out the bass where you hear it a little bit more, too. It's like a chorus effect, but a little bit different. A wah kind of effect, almost. No, it is. It has all 3 of those effects. I think just because of the register that a bass string has, when you run it through a phase shifter, it just takes on those other characteristics. Which is funny because I don't really use any effects. Sometimes I'll use a little bit of a chorus, but it usually takes away from the bass. It's usually like, I lost something here. It's a cool chorus, but you can, especially if in ears where you're playing, it's like, I just dropped out. Just leave it. Usually I don't use any effects, but the Phase 100 I can throw it in and get away with it here and there. Well, you remember you actually recorded 2 tracks simultaneously, or it was the same signal run through 2 inputs. One of them was just the clean bass right into the board. Then there was the distorted track. I don't think did we use that distorted track at all? Yeah. We did a little. Yeah, it's actually. Well, the thing with the distortion track, the cool thing about that is it's just a little bit of hair. You don't add. I mean, you can add as much what you want, but I got those ideas from how Geddy Lee gets his tone and stuff. That's if you listen to Moving Pictures, it's not a clean bass.
Not at all.
But if you just have a distortion box on bass, you don't really have the nice low end either.
Right.
So what I like to do is I like to get it where it's almost too much and then bring it back a little bit myself, because I like to have a little bit of hair on it, where it's a little bit rock still, because not that there's anything wrong with it, but I used to call it kind of like the GIT thing, but it just seemed too clinical, and just so I like to give it. And also, as I was telling Jim when I first came in that day, I'm always searching for the good Ampeg amp head. And those are usually the most beat up SVT that you can find is probably going to sound the best. Those are the ones that you get that Glenn Hughes, Roger Glover just blowing up the amp sound, which is cool.
Hughes and Deep Purple, right?
Yeah.
Like
So that's what I like to have, but I found a simpler way to do it. Run 2 tracks and just blend it in a good way. That's what I like. But it doesn't have to be much. It can just be a tiny bit too, where it just takes it a little bit, so it's not just so clean. It kind of gives it a little bit of
hair.
Yeah, hair.
Which is which has relevance for you.
It does, just a little bit.
When Jim went to mix, he's, we always look for like reference materials. What's something that he can use as a reference? And of course, these songs were all written in the 80s, so I started thinking 80s stuff. And one of the songs I sent him was, I think, In Your Eyes, Peter Gabriel. And specifically for the bass. Right?
That's a great, yeah.
Specifically for the bass, to say, see if you can't give Barry a little Tony Levin.
Oh, wow, he's great, yeah.
And I think on Grown Up, I don't know if you use that as a template, but the minute I heard your final mix of Grown Up, I'm like, oh, this he had to have used Peter Gabriel for this.
Those were great sounding records.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a record that sounds better than his records with those Tony Levin.
So crisp, and clean and pressing, and yet there's still so much room in it.
Well, I'm just finished up a record right now, but I like to, being a bass player, I like to get the bass as you don't want it to take over everything, but a lot of the great sounding records, the bass is louder than you realize. It's really pumping there, and I like to get it where it doesn't take away, because like in the latest thing I did, I'm playing the guitars too, so I can separate myself from the bass player and go, well, that's a cool guitar player, you're stepping on him, guy, so I can kind of, but I'm still going to put it, but I like to have it so, especially the drums and bass, I like them to be as loud as I can. When you crank it up, you want to hear that kick drum, you want to feel it, you want to have it present there, and if you just have guitars and stuff, that's wonderful, but but it takes away from the punch of everything. You need to have that.
No, I agree, and some of the mixes, the instrumental in particular, I emailed Jim back and I said, take all the guitars, the cello, the keys, everything but the bass and drums.
All. Throw the whole thing.
And I think turn it down a whole decibel, and I don't know how much you turned it down, but the point was I want to feel the kick, because it's not even in this mix.
Yeah.
And when the next mix came back, both the bass and drums were in there. The point I wanted to make about Grown Up was the bass was so good in that song. I emailed him. I said, holy crap, what did you do to the bass? Can the bass sound like this in every other song?
Well, I do like how it is present in all the songs. I like that. And it's not a selfish thing, I hope. But it is, I think it's the underdog instrument that doesn't get, unless, obviously Billy Sheehan and guys like that, it's up front always.
Yeah.
But it's nice to hear it when it stands out and people go, oh, wow, that's a cool bass line. Like I remember in the late 70s and 80s, I actually had a Disco Sucks shirt. Of course, I was a rock guy. But
yep, I remember
that being said, if you listen to some of the disco songs,
those bass players were
bass
monsters.
Lines are great.
Yes.
And it's because they're way up front. So the guitars can still crunch and still have the bass can still be in there too.
They also carried the groove, which which was the difference. Like in rock, you'd have bass players who could lay down a more intricate and a more developed bass line, but it was on par with the vocal, or it was on par with what the guitar was doing. In disco, the bass is laying everything down, and the guitar's just a little
lot
nuance.
of great disco bass players.
Bernard Edwards and Chic, it was tremendous.
All those groups are really cool, and it was really loud. But that's what you don't realize. You're listening to the bass. Usually, it's like, oh, that's a really cool song. But yeah, it's what drives the song. And even with B's and other things, like to go back to the melodic thing. Paul McCartney is a big influence for me as far as when there's a vocal line, having a little melody with it. So I try to always have something, and there's a sticker. What's the sticker that says, "Well-behaved women rarely make history"?
I hadn't heard that one.
You seen that one? I have that "well-behaved bass players rarely make history."
So
it's the same thing. I mean,
play
it's
out
like,
a little more, right?
Well, it sounds bad. You have to have musical taste. I mean, you have to have musical taste. That becomes first. The song is first, always, of course. But try to do something cool, too. Until they tell you to shut up, then you stop.
There was a bass line you threw into Lights of Home in particular, which is do 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 do, which is like at the very end of the song. I love that lick. I love that lick. The minute you played it, I still love it to this day.
I have no idea how that came about. Yeah, that must have been. I must have been just playing off what was there. Yeah,
that's another one of these songs where it's the same chord change for the 5 minutes. So you clearly made a point of this one. I'm going to be a little more fluid. I'm going to lay back a little more. Now here's the second time you're hearing. I'm going to play a little more. And by the end of the song, where the vocals have dropped out, you really filled it in, and that's just part of what gives that song magic for me.
Yeah, and you know what? I've been talking about all about playing, but you know what? The truth of the matter is, you put on Back in Black, like I said, and that's one of the greatest bass and drum records ever, and it's just a couple notes. So that being said, I don't want to sound too. It's not about.
There's right.
It's so much showing off as just trying to throw yourself out there where you create melodic, memorable parts.
Right, but it's not show off, right? That's the thing that I think is one of your strengths, is you can show off. You're a better player than most of the people who played on this record, but that isn't who you are. And it's difference between giving the song what it needs and hijacking the song and turning it into your personal showpiece. And that is something that you've never done on any of our albums.
Yeah, I hope that's what I was trying to say. I don't want it to come across that way because like I said, my heroes, bass heroes as far as that, are usually more in-your-face guys. You're playing solo, Whistle, Geddy Lee, and these guys.
Squire.
But that being said, and Billy Sheehan says this too, it's 90% of the time you're just laying down the groove and you're playing the stuff. It's just those little things that you try to inject personality into it. I'm sure Jim does the same thing when you want to, obviously laying on the groove, but if you're not going to play something that's interesting, you can get a drum machine or something else,
Boy, are there a lot of drum machines out there.
Yeah, and you can't, it's hard to even tell whether they are or not,
No, Jim does that too, and I've made this point. I think it's particularly relevant to the two of you because you play before the vocals are in, before the keys are in, before the guitar solos are in. So you're playing. I mean, Jim is just playing the worst scratch guitar ever, and even worse singing.
It wasn't that bad.
And somehow thank you. And somehow he's able to construct what is the final drum part, and you're working with the real rhythm guitar tracks, which are hopefully a little better. But you also pick your spots, and it's just crazy how when the whole track is in, you picked the right spot. The place where you played, there wasn't going to be anything. There's nothing happening vocally. It's not a guitar solo.
That's total luck.
And it's instinct. I think it's instinct. I think the two of you both know instinctively.
Well, you can kind of tell. I think as a drummer too, you could feel, and he's setting up the verse into the chorus. He's going to do something, and I can anticipate that coming along usually. And there was a couple times I think where we listened back and it's like, I'm doing something that's a little maybe rubbing what he's doing, so I go back and you either simplify it
And
or you
sync up,
play
right.
what the drums are playing.
Yep.
So there is a method to it, but like I said, there was a cool, actually last night, there's a cool, believe it or not, Steve Miller Band song I heard.
Yep. Which one?
It's off the Joker, which is before.
Okay.
And there's a whole bass solo in it, and there's a whole bunch of groove and drums, and the bass solo is great. It's so right at that end of the period where people started, chopping things up, but it's so really cool to hear that play and stuff. Sometimes if you watch the show Austin City Limits, what is
Yeah.
it?
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you see a lot of bands on there, and they're doing that thing. It's not the same technique. It's usually like a couple chords, but
Yeah.
but they're kind of bringing in the jam element still, which is really cool.
No, musicians always gravitate toward that. They always gravitate toward let's do something different. Let's not be cookie cutter. I want to express something in my playing and in what I'm doing, and that's just a really great way.
Well, you know what? Another thing to add to that would be there was a time when Pro Tools came out, and they still do it. Everyone's correcting everything. But nowadays, I do think there's more of with the analog tape modelers
more
and all this other
grassroots.
stuff. A lot of times you get those MIDI instruments and you pull them off the grid and you go, well, that's great, but I don't want it to. Let's make it sound real. So you don't really, you turn the quantize off to get the more real sound. So people are kind of getting tuned to this is kind of the real stuff, So it's
one of the
coming
reasons,
around a little bit.
It's one of the reasons we have a cello on this album.
Which sounds amazing,
Right.
by the
really,
way.
yes, it does sound
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Did you know that flute is not a real flute?
I didn't know that. I think in when we recorded, I might have heard some talk that was a keyboard, but
Yeah, it
you
was.
can't you can't tell. Yeah, it's
That's
done
such
well.
a good sample. Yes.
Yeah, even if you've ever checked out the Mellotron modelings, which Jim has, it's so authentic. It blows your mind. But it's a lot of the keyboard stuff is really close. I mean, you can't tell. I'm sure you're schooled on all the latest.
Mellotron.
What is that?
Might do. Oh, I remember the Mellotron.
Yeah,
Are you
the
kidding?
Rain song.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Beatles. Yeah.
Moody Blues, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they used it all the time. Which was actually just a
Jim, will you edit this so we make us sound younger?
we should start throwing
Cut out
out
Mellotron.
we should start throwing out some more contemporary bands then. Stop talking about bands from the 60s.
Yeah.
But that's what we grew up on, and that's what we love, And it's like, I thought it was a great story when you talked about playing guitars with your grandmother when you were 12. That's when you learn,
We
right?
rocked.
Right, and you said
My grandmother rocks.
You
She
said
does rock. She's 94, I think, maybe 95. She's
even as a default to this day, there's still a part of you that wants to sync up to what the
still wants to rock with my grandma.
Right,
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah, she is 90, maybe 95, but she's still totally with it. Oh, I'm going to Japan next week. Oh, so you're going to Japan? I heard about, so she's totally with it. So hopefully another 100 years.
All my grandparents were gone by the time they were in their mid-90s.
This is where we go. My grandmother is tougher than your grandmother.
My grandmother would kick the shit out of your.
Oh, that's great.
Well, bands of the 60s, Cream.
Sadly, as you know, last week, Jack
Rest in
Bruce,
yep, rest
one
in
of the
peace.
greats. I do have a quick Jack Bruce story. In 2001, there's a Uli John Roth DVD that I'm on, which Jack Bruce guest with us too. So in the middle of the show, I actually played rhythm guitar with UFO. And Pete would come on and with UFO, and then also Jack Bruce came on and played some bass. So I was right. I mean, he's one of the guys. Him and John Entwistle. So one of the greats. Another one of the greats is gone, but he was awesome. Yeah.
Left with Eric Clapton from Cream.
Which is also amazing. Cream, Zeppelin, Deep Purple, The Who.
Well, Mitch Mitchell played with Hendrix.
Yeah.
That's what that like is. Those are the two drummers that I wanted to get
Yeah,
in there.
yeah,
Ginger
yeah,
Baker
yeah.
and Mitch Mitchell. So many English right? So many English musicians.
You know what? I was just strange to say that my mind does actually work. Last night I was thinking about this, listening to radio again. In England, a lot of the guys like the Stones and Jeff Beck and everybody, Jimmy Page, were all listening to the American blues black players.
Yep.
They took the blues over to England, and then all us over here started copying the blues from the English guys.
The way they did it, right.
So it's kind of funny how it going over there and then comes back here in a different form. Still, they put on Led Zeppelin 1 and the early Deep Purple. It's hard to beat that stuff.
I'm glad Deep Purple is getting some love in this interview because they are such an overlooked
Can you believe they're
band.
not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Yes, I can believe it because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a joke. It's a joke. How could Deep Purple not be in there?
No. Run DMC is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or somebody like that, right? And then they're not Deep Purple.
I am more comfortable with that than I am with Hall and Oates.
Yes. But, yeah. Well, I'm not sure how to respond to that. I know what you're saying. Yeah. But how does Deep Purple not get there?
Because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is some music industry elitism love fest, and those people don't like Deep Purple. They're not asking
you know what?
you or
one
me
of the
or
most
Jim
sad things.
who we think
one
ought
of
to
the
be in.
the one that got away. I don't know if I ever mentioned. I got the gig with Richie Blackmore.
You got what? To gig with him?
I met with him and I got the gig with Blackmore's Night.
Oh, awesome! Him and Candace and I forget who else is in the band.
I flew out to New York and they flew me out there to meet Richie. It was just me, Richie, and Candace in an empty restaurant with guitars, acoustic guitars. We played, jammed. They sent me before that. They sent me a tape, MP3, I guess it would have been, a classical song to play to.
Yeah.
I stayed up all night long playing the bass to it. It was kind of a tricky part, and I emailed it back to them the next morning, and they were pretty surprised. I think. In fact, Richie told me, he goes, I was a little questionable if you slowed down the tape or something. How did you play it with your fingers? And that was kind of my big thing, was playing all the fast stuff. You know, the Yngwie did all the time. But so I flew out to Long Island where they lived, and we jammed in a restaurant. Had a great time. He, to this day, is the most amazing player I've ever been around. He is amazing, more amazing than you would realize. But we played acoustic guitars, jammed, had a few beers, hung out, flew home. You got the gig, Sparks, you know, great. We're going to go touring castles and everything in Europe. Great, awesome. A couple weeks later, Richie wants to fly you back out. Okay. Flew back out to Long Island. This is back in 05, maybe, 6. Flew back out to Long Island, went to the same restaurant, hung out, jammed guitars, talked about stuff, and had a few beers, and flew back home. Flew me to Finland just to see the gig, just for fun. It flew me all the way to Finland just to check out the gig. Flew out there, watched the gig, totally blown away. Richie hung out in the hotel. We had a few drinks and had talked about stuff. And Richie, he's from a different planet. I've played with a lot of guitar players, but he is probably everything Jeff Beck is. So they touch a guitar. It was my hair is standing up now. He was so amazing. So amazing, so great. I mean, just so, he'd play one note and it's like Jeff Beck going, oh, of course, that's perfect, you know? And I was just finishing a tour with Ted Nugent, and I had 3 shows left.
With Ted?
With Ted. We've been on the road for months.
Yeah.
And, okay, this is, you know, it was their manager calling. Okay, we need to be in Greece to start rehearsals on the 7th or something. And I look, okay. I got 3 shows left. I can't be there till like it was like the 9th or something like that. So after all this preparation to play,
you didn't play?
Actually, I had the gig. Everything we were gonna do the whole thing.
Yeah.
The sound man with Ted, who was our sound with Dokken and many other bands, he had been with Blackmore's Night for 10 years, and he was the guy who goes, "Hey, you should try for Richie." And I go, "Yeah, hello." Yeah. He couldn't make it either. We were both. We were. I mean, it was a terrible thing where you're going. Oh, it was a wonderful gig to get, but you can't just abandon some. I need 2 more days because you can't just leave. You know, Ted. I love Ted.
Right.
He's going to go hunting for the rest of the year. He was done, but we had to. I had to say, listen, I can be there. I will give you blood on
Hold
paper.
that spot.
That will promise you I will know the songs better than anybody. But they, Rich Blackmore, he didn't take kindly to that. But I was in the nicest way. But he was totally. That's the one that got away kind of like because he was the. I played all the Guitar Heroes, but he was the tip of the pyramid, whatever.
Yep.
But and I tell the story how amazing he is. He's such a great player. I mean, you don't realize how great he is until you're sitting next to him, he's playing, and you're going like, you are the master. And he's got some kind of, probably like the same thing Jeff Beck has, or the same. He's a guitar god where you walk. I remember walking up and pulling up and, rental car going, okay, here he is. Okay, and you walk, that's freaking Blackmore over there, He's sitting waiting for me to get there, and he's like the wizard waiting. Who's this guy? What's this guy? And they were actually really questionable about my affiliation with Ted Nugent because I was out touring with the biggest hunter of all, and at the same time, they were fighting the hunters on some of their land with the gun users. So I was kind of like, they were like, who is this guy? So I had to go in with a white flag and go, listen, I just want to play this rock. But he's awesome though. He was really. I like to tell a story. Anytime I can slip in, I got the gig with Blackmore, I do.
I just wanted to say, I think one of the reasons Blackmore maybe doesn't get as much credit for his guitar playing prowess, that's a tongue twister, is he's playing with John Lord.
Yeah,
who's
so great too.
Also rest in peace. But he was so good,
No, I'm going to squeeze one more story in. Okay, when I was playing with that Legends of Rock tour with Jack Bruce, that same tour, Don Airey, with the great keyboard player, was playing with us, and I was in awe. I played a bunch of shows with Don, but I was always in awe of playing with Don because he was such a great keyboard player.
He's in Purple now, isn't he?
Yeah,
with
but
Steve Morrison,
I was there when he got the gig because we were in Wales rehearsing, and Don comes to me and goes, I'm getting a gig with Purple. And it was his dream come true. That was his, John Lord doesn't want to do it right now, and I'm getting a gig, So we were just days away from playing shows. But Don got, it took a lot to replace Don. They called 2 keyboard players in from Germany, 2 great players. But to cover all that in such a short time, we needed 2 guys to do it. But that's when he started playing with Deep Purple, and he's... Between him and Uli, doubling each other.
Uli's a tremendous player.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing how the talent. I was always like, oh, what am I doing with these guys?
Should have called Derek Shurin in.
I've played with him too.
Yes.
No, he's amazing too. But
he's tremendous.
That guy's great too. And another great keyboard player, Tony McAlpine.
Yeah, he is a great keyboard player.
It's like, he's a guitar player, but actually he's a keyboard player. He's actually more of a keyboard player.
He's actually a better keyboard player than he is guitar
people don't know
player.
that, Yeah, these guys are scary. There's something wrong with them.
Well, Barry, I'd just like to thank you so much for taking the time to stop by today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for playing on this record. You made it so much better. Always a great time.
Thank you. Let's do it again.
Let's do it again, definitely.
And that's a wrap.
And I think
you know all your stuff, don't you?
You know
all your stuff. Oh, it's like Barney. I watch this every day. I know this part.